This is Mo Volans for Mastering the Mix, and in this series of videos we're going to be taking a look at various mixing and mastering techniques that should help you improve your overall sound. In this video we're taking a look at levels and limiting and the relationship between the two. How can you come out of a mastering session with a loud, punchy master, but also keeping those levels in check and making sure that you're delivering the correct loudness for the correct platform. So let's take a look at the session we're working on and get into it. So here we are in Logic in our mastering session, and I'm going to go through every stage of the mastering session, showing you how to focus on getting the right level, the right dynamic range, and delivering the right loudness. We'll always pretty much start with the file that we import, and this is the pre-master or the mix. Now in this case, I exported the mix myself, so I know it's behaving itself pretty well, but it's well worth spending some time at this stage in your mastering session, making sure that things are right. This will really pay off later. So what are we looking for? We're looking for two things really. We're looking for good dynamic range, and we're looking for a certain amount of headroom and lack of clipping. Now, things could be clipping and you could have headroom, so you really should look out for both. First of all, visually, we can just look at the file, and this is it here. And we can see overall it's pretty uniform, so it's going to be pretty easy to handle in our mastering session. There's not really any wayward transients sticking out. There's a little bit here, but it's pretty uniform, and I'm quite happy with that. Also, we can see there's a good amount of headroom. If I play it back, we can see we're only really peaking on this peak level meter here in Logic at around minus 2.7. So we've got about 2 to 3 decibels of headroom. So that's great. And looking at the waveform, it looks healthy. It's not squared off. There's no immediate signs of clipping. So it's quite likely there was no heavy processing on the master bus when this was exported. Now we can dig a little deeper, and I'm going to use levels here from Mastering the Mix. And I'm going to look at the peak level meter here. We've got true peak turned on. This means that we're actually going to be measuring the true peak and checking for intersample peaks. Again, we can see that we're about minus 2.3 decibels away from true peak, so things are in good shape. We've also got a good amount of dynamic range, and our LUFS is around minus 20, so at this point we're way in the safe zone. So as far as levels go, with this pre-master, I'm completely happy. So this takes us on to the next subject, which is gain staging. Now, gain staging really makes more sense in the analog domain, but because we're going to probably use processors that closely model their analog counterparts, this is still quite important. So the first processor that I'm going to use is a bus compressor. This is pretty common in a mastering chain, and here I'm using the Shadow Hills Class A from Plug-in Alliance and Brainworks. Now this clearly closely models an analog processor, and it's going to behave in pretty much exactly the same way as its analog counterpart. This means we need to feed it with the right levels to get a sound that we're going to be happy with. We don't want it overloading, clipping, and being fed incredibly hot levels. Now we know that our pre-master is in good shape, so the levels going into it are going to be about right. Let's play things back and take a look at the settings that I've got. Now I've only got about minus 1 dB of compression here. I've got a high-pass filter, a little bit of a mono maker, and a touch of stereo width. I've got both compressors working equally. There's 2 compressors in this unit, and the output levels are about the same. So if we go to our peak level, we're going to see about minus 2. And I'm happy with that because it's about what was going into the compressor, so we've kept things pretty uniform. And that, in its most simple form, is gain staging. If we were to overload things, then the gain staging would be a little out of whack, but you can just keep an eye on this at every stage. So every processor that you use should be outputting around the same sort of gain that's going into it. It doesn't have to be exactly matched, it's just a good idea to keep an eye on this. Okay, so the next processor I'm using is an EQ, and I'm just high passing and adding a little high-end sweetness. Again, I'm going to watch the level here. It's not really about the processing we're adding, but we're really focusing on the level at each stage. Again, we can clearly see here we've got a lot of headroom. I've got minus 1.6 on the output. Not sure we need that much attenuation. But as long as we're maintaining that headroom, again, we're in good shape. You can hear the level doesn't really change much. We're getting the processing we want, but we're not really adjusting the level. So next up, let's take a look at bass room. I'm attenuating some low frequencies here and adding others. I'm really adding some subs, and there was some frequencies between 40 and 80 I wanted to reduce. Again, I'm going to focus on levels here. If we click the little bypass icon here, we can see a suggested level output. I'm at minus 0.3. If we play things back, you may see this move. This just allows you to compensate for the amount of low end added in bass room, and again, keeps our gain staging in exactly the place we want it to be. We're right on target here, so I'm completely confident that we're outputting the correct level and not inducing any clipping or distortion. With all of these things in place, our gain staging correct, our dynamic range pretty much intact, and only a small amount of compression applied, we're ready to hit our limiter. This is where we can reduce dynamic range and add any loudness that might be needed. So we can see here, we've got about minus 12 LUFS, but if we open levels, we're going to see the same sort of thing. We can also check our true peak. We're at minus 0.1. I've got this set here on the limiter. Let's go back to levels. Let's take a look at the LUFS. Now I've got this set to mastering CD, and we can see that we're well within the green here. Let's say we wanted to master for Spotify. We can see that the LUFS is fine, maybe a little hot, so we can reduce the limiter. Okay, that's pretty good, but our peak level is a little high. This is because some streaming services may actually add a little peak level during their encoding, and this isn't going to be perfect for Spotify, so let's reduce that in the limiter. And some more. So we're going to drop about a decibel. Let's reset things here. Now we know we're in a comfortable spot if we're mastering for Spotify. There are plenty of other options here, by the way. We could say we're mastering for SoundCloud or YouTube, CD or Apple Music. The requirements are slightly different for each, so you're going to get different suggestions. At this point, I'm pretty happy with the master. We had a good amount of headroom at the start, a good amount of dynamic range. We've kept that pretty much intact. We've not over-compressed or over-limited. And right at the end of the chain, using levels all the way through, we've ensured that we're going to hit the right level and the right loudness for our delivery platform. Hopefully this has given you some insight into the subject of levels and loudness when mastering in the box, and I'll see you next time.